The sound came first wood on bone, a flat thud that emptied my lungs. The bat bounced across the floor and rolled under Grandma's coffee table. I was on my knees, cheek to her braided rug, tasting dust and metal. Dad's boots planted in front of me. "Sell the house," he said. "Your sister needs the money." I tried to breathe. Pain slid under my ribs like a blade. The window was cracked. The neighbor's wind chimes made a bright, cruel music. This room used to smell like lilacs and lemon polish. Tonight, it smelled like fear. "Please don't!" Mom's voice fluttered behind him. My sister hovered near the doorway, arms folded. "Grandma wanted it for the family," she snapped. "Grandma wrote her will," I said, or meant to. The words thinned against the pain. Dad raised the bat again. Sirens split the evening. 2 sets close. Tires grabbed gravel. The front door swung wide, and 3 uniforms filled the frame, a county deputy and 2 from Shore Patrol. "Drop it," the deputy shouted. The bat clattered. Dad's hands rose. One of the Shore Patrolmen squinted at me, then straightened. "Captain Hart," he said crisp as the parade deck. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The room hiccuped. Mom's fingers flew to her mouth. My sister stared like I'd changed languages. Dad looked from the sailor to me, to the ribbons in the shadow box over the mantel, back to me, calculating, and suddenly lost. "I'm okay," I lied. When I tried to stand, the left side of my body lit white. The patrolman Ellison caught my elbow careful. The deputy cuffed my father and read rights over my ragged breathing. On the porch, neighbors pretended not to look. Mr. Whitaker, across the street, stood behind his pickup like it was a pulpit. Ellison keyed his radio. Possible rib fracture. Then to me, softer, "Ma'am, keep still." I kept still. Dust swam in the lamplight. When the EMTs hustled a gurney in the paramedic's tone was brisk and kind. "Name." "Captain Naomi Hart," I said, stubborn for no reason. They slid me onto the board. As we wheeled past the mantel, I caught Grandma's photograph in her Sunday hat, eyes amused as always. If she'd been here, she'd have put on a kettle and made everyone sit until truth calmed down. Dad met my gaze as the deputy led him out. In the space between us, I saw the man who taught me to ride a bike and the man who swung a bat, both present and arguing under one skin. He mouthed something, my name maybe. I couldn't tell. The ambulance smelled like plastic and bleach. The medic asked about pain. I gave him numbers and tried not to be a hero. At County General, an X-ray tech whistled softly, not unkindly. 2 fractures, the doctor confirmed, later tapping a screen. "You're lucky it didn't hit a lung." I nodded, because that's what you do when somebody hands you mercy. Night settled against the windows. The TV muttered to nobody. A nurse adjusted my bed and asked if I wanted water. My hands shook when I lifted the cup. She held it with me without a fuss. Ellison appeared in the doorway, hat tucked under his arm. "Ma'am," he said, "county's taking statements. We can do this later." "Now's fine." He sat in the visitor chair like it didn't belong to him. "I'm sorry you had to see my family's worst hour," I said. He shook his head. "I've seen worse by the pier on payday. But when I called you Captain, your father looked like a man who finally realized which way north is." "He cut me off 9 years ago," I said. "Over the Navy. Over me not taking the family business. Grandma kept writing. She left me the house. Now they wanted to dig my sister out of a hole. County will file assault and property damage," he said. "Whether you add to it is your call. We've got photos." Neighbor's ring cam caught the approach. I almost laughed. America, the land of the ever-watching doorbell. "Thank you," I said. He tipped his head and left me to the beeps and hallway wheels. Alone, I let the meds dull the edges and let memory do its old work. 9 years of faces and rooms marched past base housing with thin walls, a thrift store Christmas leaning, midnight bridge watches, while a destroyer moved like a quiet city. Grandma's floral envelopes, ink shaky sentences steady. "Duty makes you strong, not hard," she wrote once. I carried that line like a pocket stone. A chaplain in a gray sweater poked his head in. "Need prayer." "Maybe later," I said. "I need stillness first." The doctor returned. "We'll keep you overnight. Ice rest follow-up next week. Victim services will stop by. Do you have someone to call?" I looked at the phone on the tray. Missed calls and texts. My sister, my mother, dad, and Mr. Whitaker saw the lights. "Praying for you, Captain." "I'll be fine tonight," I said. It wasn't bravado. It was stubbornness in a uniform. I shuffled to the chapel with my IV pole. Stained glass threw blue and red over the pews. I sat and matched my breathing to the color until the pain eased. "Grandma," I said quietly. They came for the house. Saying it made it smaller. Back in the room, I called the detective and gave the basics: who, what, where the bat, the broken lamp, the 2 broken ribs. When he asked about pressing more charges, I said I'd decide tomorrow. He said he'd check in around noon. I let the present settle. In the morning, there would be statements and choices. Tonight, there was ice and breathing and the work of not letting pain turn me mean. Out the window, a med flight chopped past and dwindled. I pictured Grandma's porch, the swing, the lilac hedge, the flag she folded for me the night before I shipped out. "Come back kinder than you left," she'd said. Strong isn't the same as hard. I don't know how long I lay there repeating that. When sleep found me, it left one thought to carry into morning. They came back tonight. I'm still here. I didn't leave home in anger. Not at first. It started with a silence that stretched too long between us, like a taut rope waiting to snap. Dad had wanted me to take over the family's plumbing business. Honest work, he'd said, but I wanted the sea. I wanted to serve. When I told him I'd been accepted into officer candidate school, he laughed. "You taking orders. You can't even take out the trash without arguing." Mom tried to make peace. "It's steady work, Harold. She'll have a pension." He shot her a look that froze the room. "She'll have nothing when I'm through." That was 9 years ago. I remember the gravel crunching under my boots as I walked down the driveway, my duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The air smelled like rain and gasoline. He didn't say goodbye. Mom stood by the porch light, her hand half raised, like she wanted to wave, but couldn't. I drove east until the radio turned to static. By morning, I was at the recruiter's office in Jacksonville, signing papers that would send me far from home and everything that still hurt. The Navy didn't make life easier, it just gave it shape. Reveille at dawn. Inspection sharp enough to cut. I learned to fold a shirt into perfect squares to eat in 7 minutes to sleep on command. I learned that fear isn't an enemy, it's a compass. And for the first time, I belonged somewhere. Letters came from Grandma every month. She never mentioned Dad. Her handwriting was neat, shaky but proud. "Naomi, I saw your picture in the local paper. You look so strong. Remember, duty makes you strong, not hard. There's a difference." When mail call came, her envelopes always smelled faintly of lilac lotion. I'd tuck them into my locker like small anchors from another world. During deployment, I wrote her back between watches. When storms hit, I'd think of her kitchen window rattling in summer wind and of how she'd press one palm against the glass and say, "Weather passes. You just hold steady." I held steady. I missed birthdays, weddings, funerals. My cousin married. My sister had a baby. Dad expanded the business without me. He sent one text in all those years. "Don't come back broke." I didn't reply. By my 5th year, I'd made lieutenant. We were stationed off the coast of Virginia when my CO handed me promotion orders, Captain Select. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Hard work pays off, Hart. Keep your bearings." That night, I sat alone on the deck looking out at the water that never ends. The moon floated like a silver coin, and I realized how small family feuds looked compared to an ocean that didn't care who was right. Still, I kept Grandma's last letter folded in my wallet. "Forgive where you can, but never let anyone steal your peace." When I finally took leave, I drove back through the old neighborhood. The mailbox still leaned the same way. The family shop had a new sign, Hart and Son Plumbing, but I wasn't the son anymore. Through the window, I saw my sister behind the counter, hair shorter, face sharper. She glanced up, froze, then turned away before our eyes met. I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to Grandma's house, the small white bungalow on Maple Lane. The porch sagged a little, but the flag she'd hung still waved, faded and proud. I sat on the steps until the light turned gold and thought about all the things we lose by waiting for others to change first. That night, I stayed at a motel off Route 9. The desk clerk was an old Marine with a prosthetic leg. He saw the navy pin on my duffel and nodded. "Family trouble?" he asked. "Something like that." He chuckled softly. "They don't always salute what they don't understand, kid." Over the next few years, I kept busy. Command responsibilities multiplied medals, gathered dust, and the world moved on. But every Christmas, a card came from Grandma, sometimes a short prayer, sometimes just her signature and a drawing of a dove. In 2017, the card didn't come. I told myself she'd forgotten that the mail was slow. When January passed, I called her landline. No answer. A week later, a neighbor left a message on my voicemail. "Naomi, I'm sorry. Your grandmother passed last night." I sat in my car outside the base chapel uniform collar, undone, staring at nothing. 9 years of silence from my parents, one gentle voice gone. At her funeral, I stood by the casket in dress blues. The preacher spoke about faith and family words that sounded both too small and too big. After the service, a few cousins nodded politely. One whispered, "Your dad should have been here." I didn't answer. When they lowered the casket, the wind caught the flag's edge. I pressed a hand to my ribs, remembering the nights Grandma said, "Even when the storm breaks, it still shapes you." As I turned to leave, the lawyer approached. "Miss Hart, your grandmother left some instructions in her will. You might want to come by Monday." That evening, I walked the property one last time, the garden overrun with clover, the porch swing creaking softly. I whispered, "I'll take care of it, Grandma. I promise." The sun dipped behind the oaks. Duty called me back to base, but a part of me stayed on that porch waiting for something I couldn't yet name. And in the quiet of that drive back to Norfolk, I felt it for the first time, a tremor in the distance, the faint sound of footsteps turning back toward me. Monday came gray and heavy with drizzle. I drove through Maple Lane with the wipers squeaking and parked by the old law office beside the post office. The brass letters on the door still said, "Walker and Sons, Attorneys at Law," though the "and Sons" was half rusted away. Inside, the air smelled of paper and lemon oil like Grandma's living room. A young secretary led me to the back. The lawyer, Mr. Walker, had white hair now and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "Naomi," he said softly, "I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." "She was the anchor of us all," I said, "even when the ship drifted." He smiled faintly and opened a manila folder. "She left a simple will. No fuss, no trusts or codicils. She was very clear about what she wanted." I nodded, already knowing what he'd say, but I wasn't ready to hear it out loud. He read, "To my granddaughter, Captain Naomi Hart, I leave my home at 23 Maple Lane, and all remaining savings, for she has served her country with the integrity her grandfather once showed. May this house always be her harbor." I blinked. That's all he said. She made the decision herself. She told me she'd seen you fight your way up alone. She wanted you to have peace, Naomi. My throat tightened. "And my parents," he sighed. "She left them a single letter, said she trusted they'd find grace in their own time." 2 weeks later, I moved into the house. The room still carried her scent lilac soap and brewed coffee. The walls were lined with framed photos, Grandpa in uniform, Grandma in her Sunday hat, and one of me at graduation, the only one she'd ever enlarged. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles and sympathy. I fixed the porch swing, replaced the curtains, and planted new hydrangeas by the fence. At night, I'd sit in her rocker on the porch listening to cicadas. It was quiet, but not empty. It felt earned. A month later, the quiet broke. I came home from a morning run and found Dad's truck in the driveway. He was standing under the porch cap in hand, rain dripping off the brim. Mom sat inside the cab staring at her phone. My heart clenched. 9 years of silence, and now this. "Dad," I said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" He didn't look me in the eye. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what?" "Your sister. She's in trouble." His voice carried that old command tone, like the world still bent his way. "Credit cards, loans, bad choices. She owes a lot." I waited. He took a breath. 150,000, maybe more. "We need to sell this place." I almost laughed. We This house should have stayed in the family, he said. It's not right that you get it all. Grandma chose, I said evenly. It's her house, her will. He stepped closer, anger flaring behind his eyes. She was confused at the end. You filled her head with Navy nonsense. Dad, I said quietly, don't rewrite what you refused to show up for. Mom rolled down the truck window. Naomi, honey, your sister's pregnant again. She's scared. I turned to her. So am I, Mom. I'm scared of losing Grandma twice, once when she died, and again when you start dividing her love into pieces of property. Dad's jaw clenched. We built this town's name, and you'll let it rot for a uniform. Maybe I'll let it rest, I said. He muttered a curse under his breath. You've changed. I had to, I said. 9 years gives you time. He slammed his cap against his leg, motioning to Mom. Let's go. The truck roared off, leaving tire marks in the mud. That evening, I found a letter wedged in the mailbox. No stamp, just my name. The handwriting was Mom's. Naomi, your father is stubborn, but he's desperate. Please think about your sister. She doesn't have what you do. Love, Mom. I set the letter beside Grandma's photo. She had choices, Mom, I whispered. We all did. The next few weeks brought silence again, but this time it felt heavier. The phone would buzz at night. Unknown numbers, short texts. You're selfish. You think you're better than us. Grandma would be ashamed. Maybe they believed it. Maybe they needed to. I kept working base paperwork, online briefings, a quiet life between duty and memory. On Sundays, I'd drive to Grandma's grave with fresh flowers and tell her what was happening. I'd say, they want the house, and in my mind, I'd hear her calm reply, let them want. You stand steady. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the probate court confirming my ownership. No contest had been filed. Legally, the matter was closed. Emotionally, it wasn't. The next week, I saw Dad at the grocery store. He was thinner, older. His hands trembled when he reached for the cart. For a second, I thought he'd walk away. Instead, he said quietly, that house doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Grandma, I replied. I'm just keeping it upright. His eyes flashed, but beneath the fury I saw something else, shame maybe. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the cart behind. That night I sat on the porch again, the old flag whispering in the wind. I thought about Grandma's words. Duty makes you strong, not hard. Was I being hard, or just holding the line she'd trusted me to keep? Somewhere inside that question, I felt the story turning the way a tide pulls without asking. They weren't done with me, and I wasn't done with them. Summer brought heat that stuck to the air like syrup. The house on Maple Lane hummed with the sound of cicadas and ceiling fans. I spent my mornings sanding the porch rails and my afternoons finishing remote reports for the base. I told myself I was finally at peace. But peace, I learned, is only quiet until someone decides to disturb it. It was a Friday when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my parents stood on the steps again. This time, they didn't look desperate. They looked determined. Dad's shirt clung to him with sweat. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. I hope you've had time to think, Dad said. I have, I answered, and my answer hasn't changed. He smiled, the kind that hides sharp edges. You're not leaving us much choice. I crossed my arms. Choice was what you had 9 years ago when you threw me out. Mom flinched. Dad's voice hardened. We're family. That house should stay family. You don't even live here full time. I live where I'm stationed, I said. But this house is where Grandma wanted me to come home to, and I intend to honor that. He paced the porch, wiping sweat from his neck. Your sister's drowning in debt. If you'd help pay off her loans, we wouldn't have to do this. I've helped enough, I said quietly. I've sent money before, and I've never asked for it back. But this house? This isn't about money. It's about respect. Respect! He barked a laugh. You think a uniform gives you respect? No, I said. The way I live does. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or the memory of who he used to be, before anger made him smaller. Then it was gone. Mom's voice cracked through the tension. Please, Naomi, she's pregnant. She's terrified. She doesn't have what you have. I don't have much, Mom. I have discipline and I have a roof. That's all. Mom started to cry. Dad turned away, jaw tight. You'll regret this, he said. Then they left. 2 days later, I found my sister waiting in the driveway. She sat on the hood of her car, smoking a cigarette like it was the only thing holding her together. Dad's losing it, she said before I could speak. You made him look bad. I didn't make him anything, I said. He swung first. I just stayed standing. She flicked ash to the gravel. He's talking about lawyers. He says Grandma wasn't in her right mind. She was sharp as ever when she signed those papers. He's wasting his money. Maybe, she said, eyes darting toward the house. Or maybe you are. You could just sell Split It and none of this gets ugly. I looked at her, seeing pieces of myself in her, the tired eyes, the quiet ache to be seen. You think it won't get ugly after that? You think selling the house makes the rot go away? She dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her heel. You've always thought you were better. No, I said, just trying to be better than yesterday. She scoffed, got in the car, and drove off. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the property, listening to frogs call from the ditch. Grandma's wind chime sang a slow tune above me. I stopped at the porch steps, running my fingers over the worn railing. My ribs still twinged from the fractures months ago. The pain came and went, like a reminder that peace costs maintenance. When I went inside, I saw the answering machine blinking. 5 new messages. All from Dad, each one louder than the last. You're selfish. You've turned your back on your blood. You'll regret embarrassing this family. I deleted them all, but the echo stayed. Over the next week, small things started happening. The mailbox was bent out of shape. A brick lay cracked on the porch step. Someone tossed beer cans into the yard. Neighbors said they saw Dad's truck idling on the corner at night, engine running, lights off. I called him once, just once. Dad, please don't do this. He exhaled into the phone, long and cold. Then, do what's right. I said. For once. He hung up. A few days later, I stopped by the grocery store. The clerk, Mrs. Gordon, lowered her voice at checkout. Your parents were here. They're telling folks you stole from your grandmother. I paused, setting my wallet down slowly. Did they say that? They said worse, she whispered. People talk, Naomi, but the ones who know you well, they know better. I nodded. Thank you. That night, I sat on the porch again, a glass of sweet tea sweating in my hand. Fireflies blinked across the yard. For a moment, it looked like nothing bad could happen in such a soft light. But inside the house felt like a hollow chest, quiet, waiting for another hit. I kept replaying that first time Dad raised his hand all those years ago, not with a bat, but with words. You think that uniform makes you someone. And Grandma's answer from another life, it just reminds her of who she already is. I whispered it aloud, letting the words settle who I already am. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from a law firm in town, my father's, of course. It demanded the sale of the house under family equity. My lawyer laughed when I showed it to her. He's got no standing, she said. Will's airtight. I thanked her, but the victory felt hollow. Winning a legal fight meant losing whatever was left of us. That night, while locking up, I noticed the same truck parked under the oak tree again. Headlights off, engine idling. I almost called the police, but something told me to wait. Instead, I whispered toward the dark grandma, keep them from doing something stupid. The wind picked up. The flag snapped twice. Then the truck drove away. I didn't know then that it was only leaving to gather speed for the next blow. The day it happened started like any other. Blue sky, coffee on the porch. I was trimming the hedge by the walkway when I saw Dad's truck again, same dent in the bumper, same faded decal. It idled by the curb, engine rumbling low. Then it drove off. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just passing by. But the silence after the engine faded felt heavy, like the air before a storm. That evening, the knock came. Hard. Insistent. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. When I opened the door, Dad stood there, eyes red and jaw clenched. Behind him, Mom wrung her hands. We're talking now, he said. Dad not like this. He pushed past me. I said, we're talking. The air smelled like beer and sweat. I could see the tension trembling in his hands. Mom whispered, Harold, please, but he waved her off. Sit down, he ordered. I'm not your employee, I said. You don't get to order me anymore. That's when he saw the framed will on the mantel, the document Grandma had signed, mounted neatly behind glass. He pointed. You think that paper makes you better than your family? It's not about better, I said quietly. It's about right. He stepped closer. You could have helped your sister. You could have saved this family. I tried, I said. 9 years ago, I tried. The next seconds came fast. He grabbed the bat leaning near the coat rack, the one Grandma's gardener left behind last spring. Dad, I said. Put it down. He didn't. The swing caught me across the ribs. The sound was sickening, dull, final. I staggered against the table, knocking over a photo frame. Pain exploded under my arm. The room tilted. Mom screamed, Stop it! Stop! He raised the bat again, eyes wild. Something inside me. Training instinct took over. I ducked, shoved the table between us, and shouted, Mom, call 911. But she froze, hands trembling, eyes wide with terror. I reached for my phone, pressing the emergency button. The dispatcher's voice crackled. 911, what's your emergency? I could barely speak. Assault! My father. Send someone now. Dad dropped the bat as if realizing where he was, what he'd done. But it was too late. When the sirens came, the world felt unreal, flashing red against the white porch neighbors standing in shadows. The county police arrived first, then the military police from base housing called automatically when my ID matched their system. I was sitting on the steps clutching my ribs when one of them, Ellison, again ran up. Captain Hart. Are you all right? Just hit, I gasped. He turned to my father. Sir, step away from her. Dad blinked confused. Captain. What Captain? Ellison's voice hardened. United States Navy, sir. You just assaulted a commissioned officer. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's face drained of color. Mom started sobbing. They cuffed him gently. No one wanted to escalate, but the weight of the moment hung thick. As they led him toward the squad car, he looked back at me, eyes hollow. You called the cops on your own father? I swallowed. No, Dad. You called them when you raised that bat. Mom tried to follow crying, but Ellison stopped her. Ma'am, please, wait here. When they drove off, the yard felt empty and enormous. I leaned against the porch post, each breath slicing through my ribs. A paramedic knelt beside me, checked my pulse, and said softly, You'll need x-rays. I know, I said. Been through worse at sea? He smiled faintly. Not the kind that comes from family. At the hospital, under the glow of fluorescent lights, I stared at the ceiling while the doctor taped me up. 2 fractures. 1 bruise the size of a grapefruit. You'll heal, she said. Try not to move too much. She didn't know how hard it was to stay still when everything inside was cracking too. Detective Rowe came in to take my statement. He was middle-aged, tired eyes, decent heart. Captain Hart, he began. Do you want to press aggravated assault charges? I hesitated. The word Dad echoed against charges like a war drum. I don't know yet, I said. He's my father. Rowe nodded. And you're his victim. Take your time. Back home the next day, the living room looked like a crime scene. Broken lamps, splintered table glass everywhere. Grandma's photo had fallen, but didn't crack. I picked it up, set it straight, and whispered, I did what you'd tell me, stood steady. Neighbors stopped by again, some offering sympathy, others curiosity thinly disguised. Mr. Whitaker left a casserole on the porch and muttered, Never thought Harold had that in him. I didn't answer. I was too tired for gossip. That night, I sat on the same porch where it all began, ribs bound tight, sipping weak tea. The flag above me fluttered in the warm wind. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed lonely and low. The phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice trembled. He's being processed at county. He keeps asking for you. Says he didn't mean it. I know, I said softly. But meaning doesn't unbreak ribs. Silence. Then a whisper. He thought you were still a kid. He didn't know who you'd become. He could have asked, I said. All he ever had to do was ask. She sniffled. Will you forgive him? I'll try, I said, but not tonight. After I hung up, I sat there listening to the crickets, feeling the ache under the bandages. Revenge wasn't what I felt. It was something quieter, heavier, not triumph, not pity, maybe just truth. The house was mine. The scars were mine. And so was the choice of what kind of person I'd be after this. When the wind brushed through the hydrangeas, I could almost hear Grandma again. Don't let pain turn you cruel, Naomi. Let it turn you wise. So I breathed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The house stayed quiet after that night. Too quiet. Even the ticking clock in the hallway sounded like footsteps that refused to leave. The deputies came by again the next morning for follow-up photos, polite but efficient. They bagged the bat as evidence, dusted for prints, and left a copy of the report on the kitchen table beside Grandma's tea tin. When they were gone, I made coffee and just stared at the steam rising from the mug. I'd seen crime scenes overseas that looked neater than my living room. The county prosecutor called 2 days later. Captain Hart will file assault with a deadly weapon and domestic battery. Because you're an officer, the base JAG office may also open a parallel review. Understood, I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. My father, my attacker, same man, 2 titles. Mom called that evening. She didn't say hello. They booked him in county. They took his belt, Naomi. He's humiliated. Mom, I didn't put him there. He did that himself. She sighed. He's asking if you'll drop the charges. I rubbed my ribs still sore beneath the bandages. I can't stop the county process, but I won't ask for more than what's fair. Her voice cracked. He doesn't know what fair means anymore. A Navy chaplain came to the porch that week. Father Michael's gray hair and sun-creased skin. He carried 2 coffees. Command heard what happened, he said. You okay? I'm breathing, I said. He nodded, sitting beside me. You know, forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in the house. It's about not letting them live rent-free in your head. I smiled faintly. Grandma used to say almost the same thing. He grinned. Then she was a good teacher. We sat there for a while, the cicadas doing most of the talking. Before he left, he said, whatever you choose, make sure it leaves you lighter, not smaller. 2 weeks later, the county clerk mailed the hearing notice. I showed up in uniform navy blue, pressed sharp metals gleaming. Dad was already seated at the defendant's table, wearing the same work jacket he'd worn to every high school game. When he saw me, his shoulders slumped. Mom wouldn't look at me. The judge read through the paperwork, asked routine questions. Then he glanced at me. Captain Hart, do you wish to make a statement? I stood. Your Honor, I don't want my father in jail. I just want him to stop coming after me. I'd like a restraining order and restitution for the property damage. That's all. Dad's lawyer leaned over to whisper, but Dad lifted a hand. She's right, he muttered. I was drunk, angry. Doesn't excuse it. The judge nodded. Restitution it is. No contact for 12 months. Gavel down. Case closed. As we left the courtroom, Mom brushed past me, eyes wet. She whispered, thank you. Dad didn't speak. He just paused by the door as if waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. Back home, I took off the uniform jacket and hung it beside Grandma's photo. The house smelled of paint and lemon cleaner. I'd finally repaired what he'd broken. Still, I left the dent in the doorframe untouched, a reminder that strength isn't the same as hardness. Neighbors stopped by now, and then Mr. Whitaker fixed the railing. Mrs. Gordon brought cobbler. The small kindnesses mattered. They filled the silence that followed anger. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a blanket, watching the lights from passing cars fade into the dark. Sometimes I'd imagine Dad sitting somewhere in his shop, the radio low, trying to figure out how to start over at 62. One evening, a knock came again, gentle this time. When I opened the door, my sister stood there, eyes rimmed red. She looked smaller, thinner. Can I come in? She asked. Of course. She walked through, slowly touching the walls, like she was measuring what she'd lost. Dad's not sleeping. He keeps saying he hit a captain, not his kid. He hit both, I said quietly. Tears filled her eyes. He wants to apologize. Mom, too. They don't know how. I'm not ready, I said. But I'm not closing the door either. She nodded. That's more than he deserves. I poured her coffee. We sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, talking about small things her kids, the garden grandma's recipes. When she left, she hugged me tight. You got her courage, she whispered. Maybe I said, or maybe she just lent it to me long enough. That night, I pulled out one of Grandma's letters I'd kept sealed for years. Naomi, if they ever turn on you, remember who you are. The sea will teach you patience. Home will test it. Don't confuse forgiveness with surrender. Love them, but stay upright. I traced the ink until the words blurred. Outside, a train horn drifted through the dark, steady and low, the same sound I'd heard the night of the attack. Only now it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like forward motion. A week later, I received a small envelope in the Mail County check for restitution, $3,800. I placed it unopened in Grandma's Bible. Some debts don't need cashing. I spent that weekend repainting the porch rail, white layer by layer, until the wood looked new. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a piece of peace. When I finished, I sat back in the rocker ribs, aching faintly, and watched the sun dip behind the oaks. Fireflies blinked across the yard, a quiet salute from the evening. I whispered, "It's done, Grandma." Justice served, silence restored. The wind moved the flag above me, steady and slow, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next blow. I was finally standing still, not out of fear, but choice. Autumn came early that year. The leaves along Maple Lane turned the color of brass, and the mornings carried that clean, chilly edge that always reminded me of Grandma's cocoa on the stove. The house looked peaceful again, paint-bright windows, fixed flowers blooming out front. Only the dent in the doorframe stayed a small scar left on purpose. I told myself it kept the story honest. Then one afternoon, a plain envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a short note in Dad's handwriting. We don't deserve your forgiveness, but your mother prays for it every night. Grandma raised you right. I hope you're safe. I read it twice, then folded it carefully into the Bible beside the restitution check. For the first time in months, the ache in my ribs wasn't just from the fracture, it was from something mending underneath it. 2 weeks later, I drove to the county rehab center where Dad was working part-time under probation. The halls smelled of disinfectant and floor wax. I found him mopping near the nurse's station. He looked smaller shoulders, curved inward hair grayer. When he saw me, the mop froze in his hand. Naomi, he said. My name sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Hi, Dad, I said. You keeping busy? He nodded, eyes glistening. Judge said I needed to. Said work helps with anger. Does it? He managed to laugh. Some days, not all. We stood there in that antiseptic hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights above us. He said, You didn't have to come. I know, I said. That's why I did. We sat in the courtyard out back, him sipping vending machine coffee, me holding mine untouched. He stared at his hands. I see your face every time I close my eyes. I don't know what got into me that night. You were angry, I said. You've been angry for a long time. He nodded. I thought you walked out to spite me, to prove you were better. I walked out to survive, I said, to find a way to be myself. He looked up, shame and pride fighting behind his eyes. When that sailor called you captain, it felt like I was looking at someone else's kid. I'm still yours, I said, just older, harder to break. He chuckled through his nose. Guess that's good news? Then quieter. I'm sorry, Naomi. I believed him. That night, I drove back to Grandma's house. The porch light flicked on, automatically warm and steady. I sat on the steps thinking about how easily anger can outlive reason and how hard it is to pull it up by the roots. A few days later, Mom called. He's been different since you visited, she said. Quieter. He asked me to plant hydrangeas again. Good, I said. Grandma would like that. You coming by for Sunday dinner? I hesitated. Not yet, but soon. Winter eased in. I returned to active duty paperwork, balancing Navy life and Maple Lane repairs. My sister stopped by sometimes with her kids. They'd chase each other around the porch while I fixed hot cocoa. One afternoon, she handed me a photo Grandma Young in front of the same porch steps. She'd be proud, my sister said. Of all of us, I hope, I replied. She smiled. Even Dad. Especially Dad, I said. When spring came, I visited Grandma's grave. The grass was short and bright, the headstone clean. I set a small Navy flag beside her name. The wind was soft that day, the kind that carries scent instead of sound. I said quietly, "You were right. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's freedom." And I swear I felt the breeze shift like approval. Later that week, I was back on base for a ceremony, new recruits taking their oaths. As they raised their right hands, I felt a strange peace settle in. Duty, family, forgiveness. They all felt part of the same fabric, just different threads. Afterward, one young ensign asked, "Ma'am, do you ever regret joining?" I smiled. No, it's the only thing that ever taught me who I am and how to forgive who I was. That Sunday, I went home early. The porch was full of sunlight, the air sweet with lilacs. The phone rang. Dad's number glowed on the screen. He sounded hesitant. "Captain, sorry, Naomi? We're having supper at 6. There's plenty if you want to come." I laughed softly. "I'll bring pie." When I hung up, I looked toward the horizon, the sky turning gold above the oaks. Grandma's wind chime tinkled in the breeze. I whispered, "You were right again, Grandma. The sea teaches patience. Home teaches mercy." And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like the house was mine alone. It was ours, messy, scarred, but still standing. Anger can build walls, but forgiveness opens doors that pride keeps locked. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living in peace and letting love return on its own time. If you've ever been hurt by family, take a breath before you close the door for good. Share your story. Forgive where you can. And if this story spoke to you, subscribe and stay with us at Honorline, where every scar has a lesson and every story finds its home.